according to the book of John. Jesus said, "Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate, and they died. But the one who eats this bread will live forever." He said these things while he was teaching in the synagogue at Capernaum. When many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This teaching is difficult. Who can accept it?" But Jesus, being aware that his disciples were complaining about it, said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But among you there are some who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the first who were the ones that did not believe, and who was the one that would betray him. And he said, "For this reason I have told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted by the Father." Because of this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer went about with him. So Jesus asked the 12, "Do you also wish to go away?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
Please read responsively Psalm 34. The eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and God's ears are open to their cry.
Praise the Lord, and souls who believe, to erase the remembrance of them from the earth.
The righteous cry, and the Lord hears them, and delivers them from all their troubles.
The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and saves those whose spirits are crushed.
Many are the troubles of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them from everyone.
God will keep safe all your bones, not one of them shall be broken.
Evil will bring death to the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be punished.
O Lord, you redeem the life of your servants, and those who put their trust in you will not be punished.
The second reading is from Ephesians 6. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power. Put on the whole armor of God, so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, so that you may be able to withstand on that evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand, therefore, and fasten the belt of truth around your waist, and put on the breastplate of righteousness. As shoes for your feet, put on whatever will make you ready to proclaim the gospel of peace. With all of these, take the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray in the Spirit at all times, in every prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert and always persevere in supplication for all the saints. Pray also for me, so that when I speak, a message may be given to me to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it boldly as I must speak. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
we're going to continue with our summer worship series, Great Stories of the Bible. Each week we've been looking at one of those famous stories that we most often learn in Sunday school, but we're re-examining them as adults. Stories that were originally written for adults, not for children, and stories that were told to help shape our faith and our worldview and our relationship with God. We've had many recurring themes. For example, last week we learned once again that no matter what happens in our life, no matter where we go, God goes with us. Even into the darkest and most sinful places, God is always with us. And as God goes with us, no matter what happens, and no matter what the circumstances of our life are, our mission doesn't change. This week, we're going to continue with the story of Esther. And before I read from Esther chapter 4, I want to summarize what's going on in Esther's life. If you remember last week, in the last 2 weeks, we read the two stories from Daniel. And Daniel takes place after the people have been kicked out of the land because they've sinned so much the land needed a break from that. And so for 70 years, they were held in captivity or slavery in Babylon. Well, after that 70 years, the people are freed to go back to Israel. Many of them do, but many of them don't. And the story of Esther takes place after that time of captivity. It's one of the last books chronologically in the story of the Old Testament. And it takes place while the Persian Empire rules the world. The story begins with the king of Persia decides to have a party, and it's a 7-day-long party, and towards the end of it, he's quite drunk with his friends, and he calls his queen to come, and he wants to show her off. So he tells her she's got to come and wear only her crown, and come and let everybody, all of his friends who are drunk, behold her beauty. And most likely she'll have to dance for them. She refuses. She refuses to be objectified and used for their perverted pleasures and their forms of entertainment. The king is outraged. He's livid that she would disobey him, especially in front of his boys. And so he wants to do what legally can he do to her? But in the end, he has her banished from the kingdom upon penalty of death if she should ever return. Well, now he doesn't have a queen, so what is he going to do? And true to his own character, he decides to have a beauty pageant. I want to be married to the most beautiful woman in the world. Kind of get a drift of what this guy's like, right? So he has a beauty pageant, and a young Jewish woman, and Esther wins it, and so she becomes the next queen. She has an uncle named Mordecai. Sometime after she becomes queen, there is a new man, Haman, who's appointed as the number 2 guy in the whole of the kingdom. And he loves it that whenever he walks into the room when the king is present, he wants everybody to bow down and worship him and just tell him how great he is. So he has this law made that wherever he goes, everybody, whenever he enters the room, everybody's got to just get down on their knees and tell him how great he is. There's one man, Mordecai, who refuses when he walks by down the street. This official is just livid. How can this man disrespect me in such a way? And so he finds out who he is, and so he decides not just to teach Mordecai a lesson, but he's going to punish every single Jew. In fact, what he's going to do for Mordecai's offense, he's going to make sure that every single Jewish person in the kingdom gets killed, murdered, slaughtered. He goes before the king, and he says, king, there's this ethnic group of people in your country that they're very disrespectful for you, and they're just really causing all sorts of problems. Let me kill them, okay? Oh, and by the way, if you let me kill them, I'll give you this huge 10,000 silver donation into the treasury of the kingdom. The king's like, cool, great, have at it. And so a plot forms. Every single Jewish person in the kingdom is going to be killed. Mordecai is just abashed. He's just distraught when he learns of this plan. We're going to pick up what happens when Mordecai learns of this plan in Esther chapter 4. Our reading for today. When Mordecai learned about all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on burlap and ashes, and went out into the city, crying with a loud and bitter wail. He went as far as the gate of the palace, for no one was allowed to enter the palace gate while wearing clothes of mourning. And as news of the king's decree reached all the provinces, there was a great mourning among the Jews. They fasted, they wept, and they wailed, and many people lay in burlap and ashes. When Queen Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. She sent clothing to him to replace the burlap, but he refused it. Then Esther sent for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed as her attendant. She ordered him to go to Mordecai and find out what was troubling him and why he was mourning. So this man went out to Mordecai in the square in front of the palace gate. Mordecai told him the whole story, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai gave a copy of the decree issued in Susa that called for the death of all Jews. He asked this man to show it to Esther and explain the situation to her. He also asked Hathach to direct her to go to the king to beg for mercy and to plead for her people. So he returned to Esther with Mordecai's message. Then Esther told Hathach to go back and relay this message to Mordecai. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his court without being invited is doomed to die. And the king had not called for me to come into him for over 30 days. So Hathach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. Then Esther sent his reply to Mordecai. Go and gather all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same, and then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die. Word of God, word of life. This is the story of Esther. It's a powerful story about a young woman who's thrust into the limelight despite her fears and her anxieties and anything that she might want to do just to avoid being in danger. When she hears about the plan that Mordecai has told her that all the Jews are going to be killed, she doesn't know what to do. She's afraid. And I can understand why she's afraid. I mean, there's precedent here. Anybody that goes into the king is uninvited, who's not been petitioned or called to come into the king's presence, gets killed. And of course, we already have seen, and she has seen firsthand, what kind of a man this king really is. He's so flippant that for just a large donation to his treasury, he's going to allow genocide to happen. He doesn't care. What's he going to care about her? He's already replaced his queen several times, and she's not the only woman in his life. And as she explains this through her messenger to Mordecai, Mordecai responds with these powerful words, this incredible truth. You got to do this. Who knows if maybe you have become queen for such a time as this. She hears the words, this truth of Mordecai, and she says, okay, you're right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. If I die, then I die. But you're right. I've become queen for such a time as this. Think about that power of that truth and what that really means for our lives. If we were to apply it, if we were to live by that kind of thinking. That job promotion that you just received. Maybe it wasn't about how good of a worker you are. Maybe God's just orchestrating things for a particular time, for a particular moment so that you can serve God's kingdom. That job that you lost, maybe it's not because you failed, but it's because God is moving you, positioning you in a new place for a certain and powerful moment in life. Think about where you live. Maybe those new neighbors that moved in next door are not there to test your patience or to keep you up all night. Maybe it has nothing to do with you. Maybe they moved in for an entirely other purpose. What about your own home? Maybe you're a large home that is wonderful and cozy and extremely well decorated and spacious. Maybe it's spacious not so that you can kick back and relax, but maybe you have spare rooms so that you can invite someone in who has no place to live. So you can invite someone in who is in threat of danger or violence in their present home. How do you know that maybe you don't have that special home for such a time as that? If we were to take this truth and really believe it, and bring it into our lives, it would change our world view. It would change and shape how we view people and circumstances and our place and everything that we have. And if you were to accept this, I realize that it's difficult to kind of sort out and figure out, well, then how are we supposed to live under this kind of a worldview, under this kind of truth? Esther became queen, and she didn't know when she was becoming queen what was to lie ahead of her. But throughout this story, there are a couple key principles that can teach us how to live with this kind of truth in mind as it shapes our worldview and our relationship with God and our faith with God. Bring up the first one. Go to the next slide. The first one is this. Life isn't always about you. You are not the center of the universe. This is something that I've said over and over again, but we have to repeat it. We have to learn it and hear it over again, because our American culture teaches us over and over again that we're at the center of the universe, that everything is about you, and certainly don't ever stick your neck out to risk someone else if you don't have something to gain. Everything about life in our country teaches us that it's all about us. And this truth, this worldview, if we allow what Haman declares to Esther to become real in our lives, then it means that we have to accept the idea, the truth, that life isn't about me. I am not at the center of the universe. That was the first principle. Let's go to the next one. Prayer and fasting help shift our perspective away from ourselves, allowing us to see God more clearly. Sometimes we think that prayer and fasting is about earning points with God. If we do it often enough or in the right way, then God's going to reward us for something. And in this story, as Esther and Mordecai are confronted with this incredible situation that's beyond them, and they have no idea how God's going to work things out, how God's going to rescue them, how God's going to... They're just lost and they're confused. They turn to prayer and fasting, that they can clearly see how God is moving in our lives. And that's what's such a key thing about prayer and fasting. It's not about earning points before God. It's about shifting our perspective. And that's what prayer does, so that we can actually see and understand, oh, this is what God is doing. This is how I need to respond in this moment. Esther knows what she's getting into. It is a big thing. And she knows she can't do it on her own. So she needs to see how God is walking right beside her as she goes uninvited in to see the king. The next one. Live courageously for the benefit of others. This is what Esther is doing. She's sticking her neck out so that people's lives can be changed and saved. Living courageously is important, but we tend to live courageously only when it benefits us. And one of the amazing things about this story, that Esther, this heroine, and Queen Vashti, was also a hero in the story. They're willing to live courageously, not for themselves, but for the benefit of others. Queen Vashti sees that her husband is victimizing women and people non-stop, and so she's willing to say, no, even if it costs me my life, someone has to stand up. Esther realizes that the people, all these innocent people around the country are going to be slaughtered if someone doesn't stand up and speak out on their behalf, despite how much danger is entailed in that. Living courageously for the benefit of others is a truth that we learn from this story about how we live out our faith. Celebrate God. If you continue reading the story, you'll discover that Esther does do it. She goes through it. She confronts the king. She helps the king to see the tragedy that is about to happen. And the king stops it from happening. People are saved. What is the response of the people? They celebrate God. Sometimes we forget how much God does to save us, to protect us, to guide us, to lead us. And we forget that our lives need to be, a good portion of our lives and the energy of who we are need to be celebrating all that God has done to save us. The Jewish holiday of Purim is created because of this story. It's one of the takeaways is that we need to find time, put it in our minds to celebrate God. God's wonderful victories. And the last one. This kind of heroism requires us to leave our areas of comfort. Both Queen Vashti had to do something courageous, but also Esther had to do something incredible. But in order for her to do it, she had to leave her area of comfort, her area of safety. She'd allow herself to feel uncomfortable in order to speak out for those who had no voice, who needed protecting. Those are 5 powerful lessons that we learn about how we live with this kind of worldview, this kind of truth embedded in our lives. I wanted to share with you 2 more stories of modern-day Esther. This is a great story of courage, of someone who was willing to go and do the unthinkable because innocent people required it, because innocent people needed saving. So there's 2 stories. I got these out of the news this past week, and I wanted to read and to share them with you. The first one comes, it's a modern-day Esther story. There's a man, his name is Austin Bavarian. He's writing about, he's involved in a ministry that reaches out and tries to stand up against human trafficking, especially sex trafficking in teenage boys and girls. And so he writes letters and he goes and he speaks about it. And he received this letter from a young girl. And he writes, 4 months ago I received an email from a young girl named Esther, a 19-year-old girl living in Florida, and the letter started out like this. Man, tell me what you want me to do. I want to help in any way possible this vision that God has given me. From then forward, Esther began actively raising awareness to stop human trafficking. She has told her family and friends about our ministry. Esther has created 30-second hourglasses to remind people that every 30 seconds someone is enslaved. She has handed out flyers and did an awareness movie night on a projector in her backyard. Last month, Esther decided that she wanted to use her birthday party as a way to continue to raise awareness. So she asked all of her friends and everybody that was coming not to give her gifts, but instead to use the money they would have spent on her to give, to save and help children in Thailand. When Esther told me her plan, I was blown away. What a story of selflessness, especially in the day when it's easy to only think of oneself. On June 27th, Esther had her birthday party. I'm happy to announce that a group of 30 to 40 people ended up raising $985. Way to go, Esther, and thank you, God. Justice, he writes, is not a win. It's not just something we should look at every once in a while to make ourselves feel good. It should be a way that we live. A people dedicated to God and showing God's love to the world around us. Powerful story. And I love that idea that this young girl had. Let me do whatever I can to stand up for all of these young people who are being literally put into slavery, who are being victimized, who have no voice. I'm going to be their voice. And she doesn't get to tell the whole world. She doesn't get to speak out in front of cameras and on TV. But she gets to speak out the people whom God has brought into her lives, or in her life. She gets to use events like her own birthday party raise awareness that people are being enslaved. She is a modern-day story of Esther. One more story I wanted to share with you. And it's the story of Rachel Den Hollander. I'm not sure if you recognize the name, but she was the first gymnast to publicly come forward and accuse Larry Nassar, the doctor at Michigan State University and the team doctor for USA Gymnastics, of sexual abuse. This man, over a period of 30 years, had molested hundreds and hundreds of young girls. She was the first person that was willing to be courageous enough to go forward in public and say, this is what this man was doing. This is how this man has destroyed my life, despite the shame that it would cause her. Seeing her example, one woman after another started to come forward. And when this man was finally brought to justice, and at his trial, before his sentencing, after he was found guilty, the judge invited any woman who had been abused by, any person who had been abused by him, to come forward and to speak, to force him to hear the words of his victims. All told, 175 young women came forward to speak against this man. The last one to come forward was Rachel Den Hollander, the first one who had gone public with her accusations. In her address to him, she brought her faith into what she said. She just didn't condemn him and tell him how horrible and how much he had ruined her life, which he had. But she said to him, as you sit there, showing no remorse or guilt for your actions, I pray that you will feel the full weight and burden of your guilt. And then she said, not so that you yourself can be crushed, so that you will understand and turn to God to receive forgiveness. And then she offered her own forgiveness. It's a powerful testimony about how this man had destroyed her life and about how her ultimate wish was for him to receive forgiveness. After she was done, people were just, they were just amazed and astounded. How could she say such words? She would then tell an interviewer that in order for her to get to the point where she's able to say those words, she spent years discovering God's perspective on sexual abuse. And then her outspoken advocacy for survivors of sexual abuse cost her church. The interviewer asked her, well, how did your advocacy of sexual abuse cost you your place in your church? And she responded with this. The reason I lost my church was not specifically because I spoke up. It's because I was advocating for other victims of sexual assault within our very own church community. She goes to a prominent Protestant church. Her husband is a seminary student. Crimes have been perpetrated by our people in our church whose abuse had been enabled very clearly by prominent leaders in our Protestant church community. That is not a message that church leaders want to hear because it would speak to them about their very own community. It would cost them to take a stand. It would cost them financially. It would cost them their roles as leaders, despite the fact that the situation we were dealing with is widely recognized as one of the worst, if not the worst, instances of Protestant cover-up of sexual abuse. Because I had taken that position, and because we were not in agreement with our church support or organization of the leaders, it cost us dearly. When I did come forward as an abuse victim publicly, this part of my past was wielded like a weapon by some of the church leaders to further discredit my voice, essentially saying that I was imposing my own perspective, my own story upon other people, that I was too clouded to see things clear. All of this was going on. Wow. Report after report came forward in Catholic churches across the country about how priests have been victimizing for decades young boys and girls. You see, it's very easy to look at other people and to cast judgment and say, oh, how can those priests do that? How can the church cover that up? When this powerful young hero was doing the same in her own church, but yet being victimized, being shamed because she was willing to speak out truth on behalf of those who were being victimized. She was given a voice and courage publicly to stand forth and say, we cannot cover up for the sins of other people. We are guilty if we enable other people to victimize those who are helpless. And it doesn't matter if we're leaders in a church allowing a priest or a pastor or a Sunday school teacher to victimize young kids, or if we're just people on the street who ignore the shouts and the yells and the screaming and the violence that's happening in the home next to us and refusing to call the police or to go over there to say something. When we stay in our own comfort zone, when we ignore the violence going around us, we are shaming ourselves, and we're telling God that our lives are ours, not yours. Because who knows? Maybe we're living in a neighborhood for that very purpose. Maybe we have a certain job so that we can give voice to the injustice that is happening around us. The story of Esther is a story that's to shape our faith, to help us understand that the circumstances in our lives are not random. And even though we don't always make sense of it, God is moving us. And our mission always stays the same, even when the circumstances change. Speaking out against injustice is an integral part of our mission and our faith. Amen? Let's stand for our song today.